Nikki Lowe, and welcome to the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show, where I share insights and interviews that support women to combine their family, work and life in a more successful and sustainable way. If being a working mum has left you feeling frazzled, overwhelmed and overworked, have I got a treat for you in this episode? Today we're talking about doing less to achieve more. Sounds great, doesn't it? It's even more brilliant because my guest is Kate Northrup, who's not only been my mentor, but she's the person who inspired me to set up Wisdom for Working Mums. Kate is an entrepreneur, a best-selling author, speaker and mother of two. She's built a 7-figure digital empire with her husband Mike Watts that reaches hundreds of thousands of people globally. Kate and Mike are committed to supporting ambitious women to light up the world without burning themselves out in the process. And today we're talking about Kate's revolutionary approach, Do Less, which is all about how to have enough time and energy for what matters most. And she's going to share with us how to get what we want in our work and life without sacrificing what matters most. And in this episode, Kate and I explore how she's managed to work less and actually grow her business more, how to stop rushing and heal our addiction to busyness, how we can harness the superpower of our menstrual cycle to have more energy and have more impact. And Kate shares some experiments that we can try out as busy working mums without putting more pressure on ourselves to actually harness this power of doing less. And Kate shares really honestly how she's used this in her own life, and having followed Kate for a number of years now, she really walks her talk. So it's amazing to get the insight into a 7-figure business owner with a young family, and how she really lives and breathes this philosophy. So if you're an achievement-orientated working mum who wants to thrive without sacrificing your own well-being, this episode is going to be for you. I can't wait for you to dive in and hear all the amazing wisdom that Kate shares with me. I think this is going to be a game changer if you've not come across Kate and her work before. So as always, I love to hear your feedback. So if you listen, take a picture and tag myself and Kate in it and share with us your feedback, because it's always amazing to hear. So dive into this episode and I hope you enjoy. Well, welcome to the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show, Kate. I'm delighted that you're a guest today.
Thank you.
And I actually came across you and your work about 4 years ago when I was at a point in my life when I was really struggling to combine my work and motherhood in a sustainable way. And I was getting to that point where I thought, do you know what? I feel like I need to lean out. And I've always been very career driven, but when I became a mum trying to combine it all, I was really struggling. And I came across you in your work, and actually it revolutionized how I approached it. And it enabled me to lean back in, but in a completely different way. So I can't wait to share with my audience your story and your message, because I think it's going to resonate with so many.
Thank you.
So for those that don't know you and your work, could you tell me and share a little bit about what you do?
Yeah. So what I do is I always struggle to answer this question. I basically research things and live my life, and then I share about them via online courses and digital media like emails and social media and books. So I'm an author, speaker, and a teacher. And my husband and I basically run a digital educational platform for women entrepreneurs who want to grow their businesses while doing less.
So today we're going to be talking about your philosophy and your book, Do Less, which for many women listening, I imagine would be, heaven to be able to actually do less in their lives. So can you share a bit about this work and how you came to share it with the world?
Sure. So I was pregnant with my first daughter when I just was so tired. Like the pregnancy really knocked me out in a way I'd never expected before. Prior to that, I've always been a really strong person, physically, like always felt hardy, like very resilient, physically speaking, strong. And it was the first time I had had an experience where I couldn't just push harder or tap into my physical strength to overcome a physical barrier, which was my body really telling me to slow down. So I cut my work hours about in half, not on purpose, not in any calculated way, but just because I could not function the way I used to. And then when my daughter was born, I had an experience where it was a fairly traumatic birth experience, and I took a real dip into postpartum insomnia, even postpartum, not full on postpartum psychosis, but I could definitely see how without the proper support structures that could have happened. And it was very rough. And then our daughter, after a week in the hospital, our daughter was sick her whole first year of her life with severe eczema. And my husband and I only had 10 hours of childcare a week after the first 3 months. The first 3 months, we were just home with her, and she was not sleeping and waking up every 10 minutes, scratching herself, bloody. I mean, it was awful. And then I was still dealing with my stuff and nursing issues. I mean, blah, blah, blah. You name it, we experienced it. And at that first year mark, 1 year into parenthood, we sat with our accountant and realized that despite everything we had been going through, and despite both of us working less than half the amount we ever had prior, we still had made the same amount of revenue in our company. Wow. And so it was a big aha moment for me when I realized, okay, well, I would never want to go back and repeat that year because it was awful. However, what if I could look at what did we do differently, and I could repeat it not out of necessity, but, out of by design. And I knew that, my husband and I aren't that special. So I knew that if it would work for us, it would work for other people. And so that's where my book Do Less came from. And that's where the work that I've been bringing out into the world since 2017 came from.
Amazing. And I really appreciate your honesty and openness about that, Kate, because I think particularly in the world of social media, we look at so many other people thinking that they've got it all together. And for me, particularly finding business people that are inspirational is really hard as a working mum running my own business, because there's a lot of people out there talking about the hustle, or people that are out there that may not have children or are not might not be the primary carer of their children. And what you're doing so brilliantly is putting out into the world how to run a really successful business. You're a 7-figure business owner, doing lots of brilliant stuff in the world, but doing it in a way where you're really living and walking your own talk. And that's really brilliant to hear, that it doesn't always go perfectly, but actually finding a way to navigate this season in our lives.
Yeah.
So why do you think now more than ever that the world needs to hear this do less message?
Well, for women in particular, we are at a moment with the fourth wave of feminism where we've made tremendous strides in the workplace. More and more women are taking leadership positions. We still have a long way to go. But on the home front, progress has not kept up nearly as much. And so, as my friend Sarah Jenks said the other day, at the office, it's 2019, and at home, it's 1950. It is still so expected that women will be the default with the children, with caregiving of family, with just all of the nurturing and caregiving and home personal life tasks. And yet we're also expecting ourselves to make really great money and excel in our careers. And it's just unreasonable. And so we really need to make a shift on a personal level, because I do believe that society changes one household at a time. And in particular, our mindset around the amount that we do, I think, is just off. Like this belief that the more we do, the more valuable we are, is making women incredibly ill. Yeah. And it's certainly not helping families or marriages.
Yeah. And I know you talk a lot about kind of the badge of honor of busyness and productivity and how to unhook our kind of self-worth from that. And I think, you know, as you said, with your own experience of after having children, and I had a similar but different experience where I got adrenal fatigue after my first child because I was trying to do it in the way that I'd always done it before. And it just very, very quickly showed me that that was not sustainable and I needed to kind of rethink this. So one of the key areas of your work is around living kind of life and doing your work based on feminine cycles and how that impacts our productivity. Can you share what this is? Because for some people listening, they may not have come across this at all before. So would you mind kind of giving an insight into what that means?
Sure. So we are cyclical beings by nature as women. We, during our reproductive years, we cycle on a 28-day ish cycle where we go through 4 different phases. Men cycle on a 24-hour cycle. Their hormones cycle as well. Our whole world has been set up for the 24-hour cycle. And then women are left beating themselves up for not feeling exactly the same every single day of the month. And that's how we are designed. It's actually our divine design of our cyclical nature is responsible for human life. So what we can do is begin to embrace these 4 different seasons that we go through every single month as our superpower, as opposed to something that's holding us back. Because when we begin to embrace them and utilize them, they actually can become our superpowers. And by the way, there's a more subtle version of this if you are on hormonal birth control, or if you're pregnant or lactating, or have had a hysterectomy, or are postmenopause, or are a trans woman. I mean, there's so many reasons why you might not be having a unmedicated predictable menstrual cycle. And so that the more subtle version of this that you can track is with the moon, because the moon actually goes through the same 4 seasons or phases every single month as our bodies go through. It's just a little more subtle. And there's actually really good data that shows how affected we are by the moon. So this is not woo-woo. The moon is responsible for gravity, which is a pretty major force, pretty scientific major force. It also is responsible for tides, and our bodies are made up of more than 60% water. So it does have an impact. It is just a little more subtle. So basically the 4 seasons are the exact same 4 seasons as on the planet every single year, but they just happen every month for women. And so they have these energetic qualities. The menstrual phase, when you're bleeding, is the winter time. It's for rest and reflection. The follicular phase is the week after your period. It's the springtime. It's for planning and initiating. The ovulation phase is the summertime, and that is for connection and being visible. And then the luteal phase is the 10 to 14 days before your period begins, and that is your autumn, and that is for completion and wrapping things up and being very detail oriented. Your brain is wired to be primed for these different activities at different times during the month because of the way your hormones work. And if you do more of the things that your brain is ideally primed for at the time it's primed for it, you get way more done with way less stress and far less energy outputted, so that you have all this extra energy for enjoying your life and your creativity.
Which is amazing. And I think that there might be some people listening that this is the first time they've ever come across this. And it is pretty mind-blowing. Just the recognition that actually women cycle on a 28-day and men on a 24-hour. because there's not many people out there that's sharing that, Kate. So I think for some people, this is going to be completely mind-blowing. And what I love about what you've done with this is you've then mapped that onto kind of your work and your productivity and how you run your business. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, it is pretty simple. So some people hear this and think they literally are supposed to be doing 100% of their tasks according to what phase they're in. I don't do that. I don't know how that would be possible. So please don't make this like yet one more barometer for how well you're succeeding at life. This is really to get to know yourself better so you can support yourself more effectively. This is not supposed to be some standard that you're now, some benchmark that you're now comparing yourself against. So what I do is I have a very specific weekly planning process that I've created over the years. And it basically entails just checking in to where am I in my cycle and what's going on with the moon. So I use my cycle as the foundation. So if I know that I'm in an ovulation week, for example, I know that I will be higher energy and feel more social. It's a really good time for outreach, for batching video content, for doing podcasts. Like I just know it's an outward time. So I'll look on my calendar for opportunities to utilize that energy throughout the week. And if it's if it's an ovulation time for me, but it's also a new moon, which is actually more of a wintertime energy. It's a like more of an inward energy. Then I just might also set new moon intentions that week. Like people get all concerned that I'm not bleeding at the new moon, which is the time that many women will bleed if we are without artificial light. Many women bleed at the new moon, but your body is very rarely going to be completely aligned with that. It doesn't matter. This is again, like, please don't use this as another benchmark upon which you're like bleeding on the new moon is not having a period in the right way. You're all of us are having our period in the right way already. So basically, I just look at where am I in my cycle, and then I look for opportunities to support that throughout the week with my schedule. So if I'm having, if it's my menstrual week, I know that I'm going to be lower energy and far more inward. And I map it out ahead of time to the best extent possible. But my cycle isn't like, some women are like clockwork where it's like exactly 28 days. Mine is more like sometimes it's 27 days, sometimes it's 31 days. So it's a little harder to map it out ahead of time, but I will more or less know when my cycle is going to come. So I will more or less be able to account for that a month in advance to leave more space in my calendar because I tend to be really spacey when I have my period. And if I need to get something done, I can. And I do, but I don't want to have an overbooked schedule at that point because I will just have limited mental clarity to get anything done. And I want to devote it to the thing that matters the most.
Yeah, and I can completely relate to that. And as we talked about right at the beginning, this is kind of time and energy management. And a big part of that is our cycles have such an impact on our energy. And what I'm hearing is that you're almost like biohacking by using your energy when it's most available to you to do the things in a way that works best.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned earlier, you really live and breathe this philosophy. So could you share a bit more about how this comes alive for you in your own kind of work, life and mothering journey?
Sure. I mean, I think that for me, as somebody who was raised in a super high achieving household, ton of focus put on academics and achievement and getting into a good college and excelling in all of the areas. It's, as an adult, this philosophy has given me a lot more grace for myself to just give, like, I no longer beat myself up when I feel a certain way. I just try to support the way that I feel. And that saves me so much time and energy. And since beginning to live in this cyclical way, and operate this way in our business and just embrace how I am, as opposed to trying to make myself be different than I am, I am able to, we've made far more revenue. The first year that I really was practicing this for a full year was our first 7-figure year. And that's been consistent across the board, which has been pretty cool, even though we added a second child to the mix and my husband went through a chronic illness in the meantime. And it also, helps me to be a mother of 2 daughters, to really notice how I'm treating my body, because I know that they're going to learn what they know about being a woman from watching me, not from what I say. And that, to me, is the biggest reason why I operate this way, is that I'm listening to my body every day. I'm organizing my schedule according to it. I am giving myself grace and space for how I actually feel. And I know that what they are picking up on then is it's good to be a woman. The way my body is right, is good, is sacred. And that's incredibly important to me, for my girls to know that about being female, because our culture has a lot of other messages about being female. And I want the message that they get at home to be the loudest and the most loving.
Beautiful and profound, Kate, and your girls are incredibly lucky to have that kind of role modelled for them. And I've been involved in your world for quite a while now, and a mantra that I often hear you talk about is, body first, business second. And I really hear that from you and see that in what you're doing, which I don't hear from very many other people. The messages I hear out there about, hustling and probably pushing past your limits to achieve, rather than use your body as a conduit for that. So that message is fantastic to hear.
Yeah.
And in your book, Do Less, you actually talk about 14 different experiments that anybody that's interested in this could follow. Would you mind giving an insight into what those experiments are?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many of them, but they are basically designed as little snippets. Many of them are based in the most current data on productivity and well-being. Little snippets of things you can try, because what women don't need is more things to do. So these are designed to take things off your plate and to give you more energy. And so things to try, save you time, essentially. My favorite one is sleep as a spiritual practice. So I am such a big believer in sleep. I'm such a proponent of sleep. I will sacrifice anything almost for my sleep, probably other than my children's well-being. That's the only thing that doesn't come before my sleep. And obviously, when you have young kids, sometimes you don't sleep, and that's just part of the deal. But there is so much good evidence that tells us why sleep is like the most powerful do less thing we could possibly be doing in order to enhance our well-being. It improves our memory. It improves our hormonal health. It improves our emotional health. So many things get better if we just prioritize getting enough sleep. And so all these things that we're working on, whether it's, going to therapy, working on our hormones, exercising so we can lose weight, eating in a certain way, blah, 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 all the things that we do, a lot of them would not be necessary if we just slept enough.
Yeah. I remember hearing somebody talk about, the 4 pillars of well-being, and we used to believe that sleep was one of those pillars, and they said we've got it completely wrong. Sleep is the foundation for the other pillars.
The foundation. It needs to be first.
Yeah. And, how many, and I raise my hand to this, my default is to sacrifice sleep to achieve, and how completely that, undoes everything else that I'm trying to achieve.
Yes.
And I love the fact that you talk about it being a spiritual practice, because I'm literally a better human being when I've had enough sleep. I can be more compassionate, and everything is just better.
Everything is better. And you're totally right. We think that if we sacrifice sleep, we will achieve more. But if you are sacrificing sleep, you are achieving less. It is totally backwards.
Yeah. Some of the other experiments are around, you talk about receiving and asking for help, which I know a lot of women and probably a lot of people listening struggle with if you've been you've got that be strong, be independent driver. And it's, in your book, you write 2 chapters on this, don't you? One on receiving help and one for asking for help.
Yeah, these are critical. If a woman is basing her worth on her ability to do everything without needing help, she is basing her worth on the wrong thing. Because a woman who truly knows her worth is not afraid to ask for help, because she knows that her worth is not based solely in her ability to do things. Her worth is based on who she is, not what she does. And so when we can begin to unravel believing that our value is what we can do, and ideally what we can do on our own, then this tendency to try to go it on our own, even when we're overworked or we have too much on our plate, then can melt away, and we can actually create the support structures and the connection that we so deeply crave. Because when we don't ask for help and when we don't receive help, it creates isolation and disconnection. And we have a huge problem with that. I mean, postpartum depression is rampant, right? And so the pharmaceutical companies are coming up with all sorts of medication for it. But, and that's fine to get you through, but maybe we should look at our society and ask, why are women and mothers feeling so isolated? It's because we've been taught that we are only valuable if we can do things on our own. And it's just not true. And so we have this, it's a real illness in our society. I think it's a pervasive illness, the belief that asking for help is a weakness. And I like to offer the reframe that asking for help is not a sign of weakness. Asking or needing help is not a sign of weakness. Needing help is a sign of being human. None of us were meant to do this on our own. And in fact, life gets way, way, way better when we're interconnected and when we're asking for and receiving and giving help, because it helps us to remember that we are not alone and that we all have each other. And when we're willing to ask for help when we need it and receive help, then we're so much better able to give help when our girlfriend needs it, or when our neighbor needs it, or our mother or our sister. So we can be there for people in a much bigger way when we also are asking for and receiving help and not running on empty.
Brilliant, because we often talk about, it takes a village to raise a child. It also takes a village to raise a mother. And, we hear so many times that in our modern world, we don't have those villages. And I think what you write beautifully about and what you've created with your community is a village that supports a modern kind of working mum.
Yeah.
And the last chapter of your kind of experiments is around let it be enough. And just that phrase, when I hear it, just my shoulders drop, my body kind of just exhales. Could you just share what that means?
Yeah. So, we have this idea that in order to be the best mother, the best worker, the best employee, the best sister, the best wife, the best friend, that we always need to be doing more. And it becomes an endless striving that is so exhausting. And when we are always trying to do more and, do more for our kids, show up bigger, and prove our worth through all of that, what actually happens is it robs the people in our life who matter the most, like our kids and our family, of our true presence. Because someone who's constantly striving and thinking they are not doing enough is not actually really there. You know, if you've been around somebody who is really unsettled and not present because they're sort of on the hamster wheel, it's disturbing. And we're living that way, and we're robbing the people who matter the most of the biggest gift we have to offer, which is our true presence. And it's sort of this irony. We're trying so hard to show up the best that we can that we're not showing up at all. And so that ending prayer is really to allow ourselves to actually be here, because that's what's best for us, and that's what's best for the people we love.
I think so reassuring to hear. And I've heard that message before, and every time I hear it, it's still so reassuring, Kate. So I am sure that people listening to this will feel the same. So if there's just one thing that you hope a working mum who's listening to this podcast takes away from listening to you and your work, what would you want that to be?
It's to know that your worth is not determined by what you do. It's determined by who you are.
Profound, yeah. So I am absolutely convinced that anybody listening to this, if they've not already come across you in your work, will be like, where can I find out more about Kate? Why tell me more? Can you share where people can connect with you or find out more about you?
Yeah. So my website, katenorthrup.com, is the best place. I have a weekly planner download that you can grab on my site for free to kind of check out a cheat sheet of the cyclical planning practice. And that's the best place. And then the book Do Less is available anywhere books are sold.
Wonderful. And I'll put all those details into the show notes that people can access and connect with you. And you're mainly on Instagram, is that right, Kate? That's where the place you hang out the most on social media?
Yeah.
Brilliant. And you're just at Kate Northrup on
Kate Northrup on Instagram, yeah.
Perfect. Well, Kate, thank you for your time today and sharing your wisdom and work with the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Wisdom for Working Mums, please share it on social media and with your friends and family. I'd love to connect with you too. So if you head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk, you'll find a link on how to do this. And if you love the show and really want to support it, please go to iTunes, write a review and subscribe. You'll be helping another working mum find this resource too. Thanks so much for listening.